Andrew here from the Revisionist Almanac. At the start of every month, I'll spend some time giving you a window into what I watched over the previous month, both new and old, share my thoughts on some of those movies. Before we get into this, though, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel on whatever podcast platform you're currently using, as well as rating and reviewing the show. In addition to that, you can find and follow the show on every major social media platform, including Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, and Letterboxd using the handle Rev Almanac. With that out of the way, let's get into some of my November watches. Up first, we have A House of Dynamite, the latest thriller from Oscar-winning director Kathryn Bigelow, a story about how various people in different levels of military and government would react to an imminent missile being launched and headed to the United States without knowing the origin of who was behind it or why it was shot. In terms of what I liked about this movie, the first third is really well crafted and it has enough air of mystery to keep you invested in the story. Bigelow also has a strong knack for increasing the drama and tension in situations just like these. I'm Looking at You, Detroit, and of course Zero Dark 30 as classic examples. I also really like Tracy Letts, who's very good in the second portion of the movie. You'll never see me disappointed when his name appears on the cast sheet. In terms of what didn't work for me, the way this story is told exactly the same from three different perspectives doesn't add anything to the underlying fear and worry. Instead, all it does is take all the momentum away from the story whenever it has to have a hard reset. We also have got to talk about Volker Bertelmann's music score. I genuinely wondered if I was being pranked with the music being a carbon copy of his previous work on Conclave. It was either recycled bits that were on the cutting room floor, or he's got a strong case to sue himself for plagiarism. It was truly shocking. I also didn't care for the end of the film, which is such an underwhelming approach. Listen, I'm always the guy that's going to like an ambiguous ending, but instead of it being open-ended and leading me to contemplate the characters and their fates, it just felt like a lazy way out of the story to not actually have to address the consequences of any of the actions that happened up until that point. In terms of who I would recommend this to, people who like Bigelow's work can probably find enough here to have a decent time. People who love a political thriller should at least watch the first 33.3% of the movie and see if it hooks them at that point. I'm going to give this movie a score of 6.5 out of 10. Next up, let's talk about Die My Love, which I had the chance to see early thanks to the incredible team over at Mubi. This is something new from Lynn Ramsey, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. It's Ramsey's first film in 8 years, her last being You Were Never Really Here with Joaquin Phoenix. In terms of what I liked, Jennifer Lawrence being fully unhinged and ferocious in an iconic performance. I do not say this lightly. This is far and away the single best thing she's ever done in her career, and yes, I'm aware she has an actual Academy Award to her name. I'm also a sucker for an ambiguous ending, as I just said, and this movie concluded in a way that was right up my alley. I also love Robert Pattinson, who plays a little shit so well, and he's the perfect choice to partner alongside Lawrence here, letting her shine, but also causing some friction on screen in just the right way. The movie also features some really smart needle drops, and it had a great visual language in the production design and the location they filmed in. In terms of what didn't work for me, this is a small nitpick, but I wouldn't have been mad getting a little more screen time from two of our supporting actors, Sissy Spacek and Nick Nolte. Both are great when they're used, but I just kept hoping they would come back into the story even more. In terms of who I would recommend this film to, this movie goes out to all the moms of the world who have to deal with postpartum depression and have to deal with the way their body and their life changes after childbirth. I think it'll connect really well with women that have experienced these own emotions for themselves. And obviously, if you've enjoyed Ramsey's past films like We Need to Talk About Kevin or Ratcatcher, this fits nicely into her career catalog. I'm going to give this a great score of 8.3 out of 10. And let's get over to our other messy queen of November, A24's If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, Mary Bronstein's anxiety-inducing film starring Rose Byrne. In terms of what I liked, Rose Byrne got the chance to really showcase her acting talent here, and she is going to be in consideration for an Oscar, I have to imagine, come the spring. I also liked A$AP Rocky, surprising me by how good he is as an actor both in this film and Highest to Lowest, which I never thought would be the case. And I personally like being made to feel uncomfortable in a movie, and you better believe this achieved that sensation. In terms of what didn't work, much like her husband's Frownland from the early 2000s, Mary Bronstein created a sense of anxiety that, while effective, was at times bordering on too much. Maybe not for me, but I think for a lot of consumers, they're going to have a hard time embracing this film. In terms of who I would recommend this movie to, the exact same people I just recommended Die My Love to. And anyone that wants to see upcoming award nominated performances, because like I said, I think there's a strong chance Rose Byrne is going to be in the mix when we get to the spring and Oscar season. I'm going to give this film an 8.3 out of 10. Exactly the same score as Die My Love. The next movie I got to was The Baltimoreans. It's an offbeat new comedy from director Jay Duplass, most known for his work with his brother Mark, though this time he's venturing out on his own, taking solo duty. The movie's about a lovable loser named Cliff, who has to get an emergency dental surgery on Christmas Eve, and he strikes up a friendship with the dentist he never met before. What I liked about the movie: there was a really nice black comedy throughout the film, with some tragedy mixed alongside very sweet but still genuine dialogue. I also think the dynamic between the two leads, Cliff and Dee Dee, played by Michael Strassner and Liz Larson, is electric. I would have gladly spent several more hours just walking around Baltimore with these two and seeing what kind of silly little shenanigans they get up to. In terms of what didn't work, I don't have much to complain about at all, quite frankly. I'm really stretching to think of anything. The movie was the right length at 101 minutes. It had a harmonious balance of characters around our two leads. It never went into too heavy cliche territory, and it had just the correct ending. So who would I recommend this to? If you're looking for something lighthearted but with a warm emotional core, this is for you. I know people complain all the time about no good or original comedies, and then they'll never get around to watching something like this to know that these movies still exist if you just know where to look. Much like Alexander Payne's The Holdovers from a few years ago, I will probably see myself going back to this annually just to hang around these characters like a warm blanket. I'm going to give The Baltimoreans an 8.4 out of 10. Let us now talk about Frankenstein, the newest film from Oscar-winning director Guillermo del Toro. At this point in time, much has been made about the merits of this movie, with battle lines clearly having been drawn. In terms of what I liked, Jacob Elordi as the monster gives a show-stealing performance. He brings the physicality of the role, but he also offers tremendous sensitivity and depth to this character that's trying to wrestle with his place in the world. I also think Oscar Isaac is so good at being bad, just a hunky man who isn't afraid to portray deeply flawed and dark characters. I also think the costume design and the set design are impressive. This was a movie where I feel like I truly missed something not seeing it on the big screen. I'm also really glad that Guillermo del Toro finally got to make something that's clearly been a passion project, which has been reflected in literally all of his work to date. Now that he's got this movie in the rearview mirror, I do hope he does something out of left field with this next movie. I just recently saw him in an interview where he said he'd be interested in doing a gritty 1970s style film, and if that's the direction he goes, I'm all here for it. In terms of what didn't work in Frankenstein, the opening third of the movie started at a little bit of a slow pace, and it took a little too long to get to the parts that I was genuinely invested in. Guillermo has certainly earned the right to do what he wants, but I think this movie at 2 hours would have really cooked. I also think Mia Goth is perfectly fine in the movie, but I do feel like her role didn't do much to play into her strengths as an actor. You could have probably cast almost anyone in that role, and little difference would have actually been made, which is kind of disappointing. And the general toxicity of social media around this movie does not work for me. Yes, I know some people love Guillermo, and others really don't care for him. But it's okay if some people find this movie incredible, and others think it's boring or not to their taste. Love it or hate it, just don't try and bring anyone down for their opinion, whichever side of the aisle they stand on. In terms of who I would recommend this movie to, obviously lovers of the Guillermo past works, or fans of the Mary Shelley source material should all welcome this film, which is so easy to watch right now on Netflix. I'm going to give it a score of 8.2 out of 10. Moving over to The History of Sound, a period piece romance directed by Oliver Hermanus. This movie was building anticipation based on it starring Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor, leading into Cannes earlier this year. However, things kind of died a bit after a less than resounding reception at that festival. In terms of what I liked, the production team hit a home run with the design of the costumes, the sets, the locales. It all took you back to the first half of the 20th century. I like that we continue to get more queer films that aren't strictly about two people in love in a time where the taboo nature of their relationship is the whole thing. This movie is about love and connection, plain and simple. And the movie sticks the landing. And that goes a long way to how I usually feel about something when my last image is satisfying to that story. And though he's not in the movie a ton, when Chris Cooper is playing the older version of Paul Mescal's character and comes into play, be it in a voiceover or on screen, he's exceptional, just as you would expect based on his prior work. In terms of what didn't work for this film, I think the slow, deliberate, methodical pace felt very intentional, but it also meant the movie had some spots where it dragged, and I can see why some have complained that it's boring. I would not personally use a term that harsh, but I get it. I'm also a massive advocate for the talent of Paul Mescal already in his career, but I felt his Kentucky accent was rough around the edges. He didn't have the control to me over that side of things compared to his counterpart Josh O'Connor, who I thought fitted a little better. In terms of who I would recommend this film to, if you're a fan of a period piece, if you're a fan of a romantic drama, if you want to see a love story that's delicate, soft, and gentle, check this out. I'm going to give it a score of 7.6 out of 10. Moving right along to Nouvelle Vague, one of two Richard Linklater films we're going to get by the end of 2025. This one's already up on Netflix, and it deals with what led Jean-Luc Godard to create 1960s Breathless and help kick off the French New Wave, clearly a huge influence on Linklater's own career and his breakthrough in independent cinema. In terms of what I liked, the word I kept thinking while watching this movie is verisimilitude. This movie immerses you into the world in such a way you could easily trick your brain into thinking you were watching a documentary from 1960 and not a fictional recreation of that time. All the actors look, sound, and act just like their real-life counterparts. I also like that this is probably going to cause people to discover and watch Godard's classic film for the first time, and we should always welcome people discovering great films of the past. In terms of what didn't work, the movie on the whole was a little cold and a little bit distant. I'm not sure what the emotional core was or how much I was supposed to connect to anyone specifically, but I didn't. Breathless has never been my favorite film of that era of the French New Wave movement, so I don't know if I'm necessarily the exact target demo. In terms of who I would recommend Nouvelle Vague, anyone that wants to see what Linklater's doing with his career today, and of course any person that has reverence for Jean-Luc Godard, French films, or specifically Breathless. I'm going to give this movie a 7.7 out of 10. I'm a little late to the party on this one, but I got to Black Phone 2. This is Scott Derrickson's follow-up to the 2021 horror film that introduced us to Ethan Hawke's The Grabber. In terms of what I liked, Scott Derrickson textures the film really well to represent the 1980s in a great way. When he wants to ratchet up the fear factor, he's also got a real knack for building that sense of dread and anxiety. I also think Mason Thames is emerging into a nice young on-screen talent. Between this and his live-action How to Train Your Dragon, 2025 has been a pretty solid, successful year for the kid. I also think horror movies are a tried-and-true moneymaker at the box office, and that's always going to make me happy that things like that do well. In terms of what didn't work, I thought the opening 30 minutes was a complete chore. A horror movie should never feel that way, and that's a huge indictment of my opinion of this movie. I also think the film leans too far into a full-on ripoff of Freddy Krueger, with the grabber now dead and inhabiting dreams. Sure, I understand Scott Derrickson's playing into the whole Dream Warriors aspect of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but I can just go and watch that movie if I ever want to go down this path to get the best possible result. In terms of who I would recommend Black Phone 2, if you're into the first movie, you'll probably find a lot to like here. I just have discovered through watching this and recently revisiting the first, I don't think I'm a Black Phone guy, and that's okay. I'll continue watching new entries in the franchise, assuming we keep getting more, but it may take some more time to win me over on this series. Up next, I got to the film Roofman, which is a true crime drama about the life of Jeffrey Manchester, who was known for robbing McDonald's and hiding out in a Toys R Us to avoid capture. Directed by one of my favorite contemporary filmmakers, Derek Cianfrance. What I liked about the movie, I love Channing Tatum. He's capable of pulling off drama or comedy easily. This movie makes great use of his skill set too. We get to see his movie star handsome looks and his charisma, but we also get to see the vulnerability he can bring to the surface with great ease. I also like Kirsten Dunst, Peter Dinklage, and the entire supporting cast, who suited the film really well. And the prison escape scene early in the film is incredibly well executed. I also like seeing Cianfrance branch out into new territory with his career. His previous films have been much heavier and filled with more full-on devastation, so this was a fun change of pace. In terms of what didn't work for me, I do think the last 30 to 40 minutes lose just a touch of momentum, and it kept the movie from fully elevating into great terrain. This movie also made me sad that we don't get enough movies like this in 2025. Things like this were very well suited for the 90s and the 2000s, where leading men got to showcase their general likability and star power. In terms of who I would recommend Roofman to, Derek C. and France fans, Channing Tatum fans, honestly, anyone that's open to a little throwback character piece with a strong emotional core and built around a real life individual. I'm going to give the film a 7.9 out of 10. Next up, we have Good Fortune, the directorial debut from comedian Aziz Ansari, and it stars Seth Rogen, Keanu Reeves, and Aziz himself. We get a twist on a classic body swap comedy between Ansari and Rogen's characters, with Keanu playing an angel named Gabriel. What I liked about the film, Keanu Reeves, always and forever. Any movie that lets him have some fun is all right in my book. I also really like Keke Palmer in the movie. She continues to show so much talent and versatility. She has great comedic work. She has great dramatic work. She's just awesome. In terms of what didn't work for me, though, the movie's kind of a one-note film, and it loses itself really within the first 40 minutes. It got to be very tedious watching the rest of the movie, knowing how simple the beats were and where the film was going to go, which it obviously did. I also did not care for Aziz Ansari and Seth Rogen, who are very talented comedic writers, and Rogen's shown some acting range, but neither seems to be putting any effort into playing an actual character here. They're basically just being themselves, and it wears pretty thin. In terms of recommending Good Fortune to anyone, if you're looking for a low-stakes, casual watch with a few minor laughs here and there, this isn't the worst way to spend 98 minutes. And if you want to watch Keanu Reeves play in the comedy sandbox he hasn't gotten into much in his career lately, this is a fun opportunity to at least let him soak in the fun. I'm going to give Good Fortune a 6.4 out of 10. Moving right along to The Smashing Machine, Benny Safdie's film about Mark Kerr, who was an early pioneer in the mixed martial arts world, being played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. In terms of what I liked, going into the film I had low expectations, and that can do wonders for a person. The trailer I saw for this looked like a full-on parody, and thankfully the movie had much more heart than I was anticipating. Dwayne Johnson also shows he has acting talent inside that very large frame, and in the face of all his big-budget crap he's churned out over the last decade or so. He does great here. I also think Safdie captured the fighting really well and authentically. Nothing felt heightened, which may turn off someone wanting it to be more violent, but it worked for me. And also we have to talk about Nala Sanefro's experimental jazz score, which fit the tone of the movie very well, and it added to every scene where it featured. And I also thought Emily Blunt was dramatically better than everyone out there seems to be making her out to be. I had no problem with her performance here. In terms of what didn't work for me, I just don't know if I needed this character study, even as big as an MMA fan as I am. I know the story of Mark Kerr, Mark Coleman, Bas Rutten, etc., and so this didn't add a whole ton to the equation for me personally. When it comes to who I'm recommending The Smashing Machine to, mixed martial arts fans will eat this thing right up, and I think it's a good showcase for people who either want to see The Rock do something different or think he's not good at his job and can see a prime example of his actual talent. I'm going to give this film a 7.4 out of 10. Moving along to Train Dreams, Clint Bentley's film about a logger adjusting to the changes of the early 20th century. This film is currently available on Netflix. In terms of what I liked about the film, it has a great lead performance from Joel Edgerton, who's one of my favorite actors today, and he's one of the most consistent as well. I also think the cinematography by Adolfo Veloso is on another level. He should absolutely be in strong contention for an Oscar next spring. The movie also has a really good score, even if it sometimes was too persistent for sustained periods of time. And I like that this is a rare Netflix movie that didn't look like a Netflix movie. The sheen that their movies so often seem to have was not here, thankfully. In terms of what didn't work for me, it was a bit dull at times. And it also took too long to really feel any connection to the characters. And while Felicity Jones and Carrie Condon were in the movie, neither of them got the time to really showcase their greatness. When it comes to who I'm recommending Train Dreams to, if you don't mind a slower, quieter, more meditative experience, you should probably enjoy this offering. Take, for example, last year's The Brutalist. If you had a good time with that film, this movie has a lot of similar notes. I'm going to give the movie a very good but not quite great 7.8 out of 10. All right, I also want to knock out some quick hits that I watched throughout November that I just don't need to go into too much detail on. First off, we had a double dose of Colin Farrell. I watched Ballad of a Small Player. I think Edward Berger needs to slow down after making 3 films in 4 years. This is such a huge step down from All Quiet on the Western Front and definitely Conclave. While it looks beautiful, if you're wanting to take a trip to Macau and scout the scenery, that's really the only reason to watch this film. I also watched A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey. Now, Kogonada makes a great looking movie, but this one was dead on arrival for me. The romance was so easy to predict where it was going to go, and unfortunately, Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie had almost no chemistry or spark between the two of them. I also watched the latest movie from Matthew McConaughey, The Lost Bus, on Apple Plus. This is the true story of Kevin McKay, who was a bus driver who managed to keep 24 people safe while navigating the 2018 Camp Fire. For those that don't remember, it was the deadliest fire in the history of California. I think Paul Greengrass was a competent hand to direct this film, but I think I would have rather just watched a documentary on the story and I've probably gotten more from it. I also watched the new Prime Video exclusive Hedda, Nia DaCosta's take on this celebrated play from the late 19th century. Now, I'm not too far removed from watching another version of Hedda from 1975, which was for podcast prep, which earned Glenda Jackson an Academy Award nomination for her portrayal in the lead role. I think this was much more interesting and it freshened up the story in a great way compared to the 70s version. If you want to see where Nia DaCosta is continuing to take her career, with 28 years later The Bone Temple up next in January 2026, check this movie out. She's proven she can operate in a number of different genre spaces, and I'm personally excited to see what she can mine from the 28 years and 28 days later world. I also watched the film Twinless. Now, there was a good deal of hype surrounding this movie from the festival circuit, and I was eager to see it based on the word of mouth. However, I was severely underwhelmed by what was a fine movie and a decent dual performance from Dylan O'Brien. But this is not something that stuck with me or gave me any urge to watch it again. It was good, but far from greatness. I watched Scarlett Johansson's directorial debut, Eleanor the Great. Now, you're not going to hear me complain about getting to watch June Squibb on screen. May she continue kicking ass through the rest of her 90s. The movie, though, much like Twinless, was good but forgettable. And I also watched Kiyoshi Kurosawa's new film Cloud, which is available on the Criterion Channel. Now, this isn't the type of movie for everyone, but if you have liked his past work, such as Pulse or Cure, you're going to be right at home with this film. It has his very particular style and tone that keeps you on edge, never totally sure what's coming next or how dark things just might get. I also want to shout out a podcast guest spot I recently did. I joined Simon and Carl from Movie The Needle, and they have a secondary show called Mash Flicks and Chill. What we did was we smashed 2 movies together, 1987's Lethal Weapon and 1998's The Big Lebowski, to make the love child that was Shane Black's The Nice Guys from 2016. The 3 of us had an awesome chat about my love for Ryan Gosling, dudism, Brits loving the C word, and much, much more. That episode is up and you can check it out by clicking the link in the show notes to this. I also did 2 industry interviews that I want to talk to you about really quickly. The first was with Sam Davis, who directs the 2025 short film The Singers. Now, Sam has been a cinematographer on films like Dee Dee from 2024 and Nine Eye and WIPO from 2023. This latest film he's in charge of is based on an 1800s short story about men at a bar that decide to compete for a cash prize in an impromptu singing competition. It is a wonderful hybrid of fiction and documentary, a space where Sam is very comfortable navigating. In my interview with him, which is currently up on the channel right now, link in the description, we talk about how he found the actors and the singers, why he decided to adapt this particular short story, and how he utilized his background in cinematography to build the foundation for the film. The second interview I did was with someone who has spent multiple decades working at Disney Animation and Pixar Animation in multiple departments, including being a director of the film Meet the Robinsons. I got to sit down along with my co-interviewer, Britt Reinholds-Hobson from the 1001 by 1 podcast, and we talked to Steven Anderson. We covered what got him into animation, we talked about some of our collective favorite animated movies, and then we got into what all goes into an animated film process, how they work as a collective unit, how directing the work differs from live action, and much, much more. And this interview will be available on Friday, December 19th in audio form and on the YouTube channel in video. And I got to a little bit of TV in November. I watched Mr. Scorsese. This is a 5-part docuseries on Apple Plus that was directed by Rebecca Miller, and it's not going to surprise a single soul listening to this for me to tell you this was like catnip for my cinephile taste. Scorsese is my personal favorite director, and it's just not because we share a birthday, though that does help things make a little cooler of a coincidence. And while I've always felt like I knew about his life, his background, his struggles with addiction, and his relationship to his faith and the church, this was a total revelation for 5 hours. It captured all the major career highlights that have led him to be one of the most revered directors of our time. But it was also brutally honest in looking at all of his failures and his demons through remarkable access to so many people that have been in his life. Family, friends, colleague, everybody, except for one notable omission, Joe Pesci, though his reason for not being there is explained in the film. The real star of the series, though, is Marty's longtime editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, the two having a working relationship dating all the way back to film school in the 1960s. We get some great footage of the two of them collaborating, as well as her showing how the sausage is made and how his films are so reliant on the way the two of them see the editing process. This is just a 10 out of 10 series if you're a movie-obsessed person like me, and if you're listening to this, you probably are. So, do you agree with any of the reviews I've just given, or do you think I'm way out of line with some of my scores? Feel free to DM me on any of the social media pages at Rev Almanac, or email the show at revisionistalmanac@yahoo.com. Leave me all your thoughts. And at the time of this recording on December 1st, a new episode of the regular monthly revised Oscars is only a few days away. I was joined by a first-time guest of the show, Frank Mendoza from the Reels of Cinema podcast, and we closed out Season 2 looking back on the 1973 year in film and the Academy Awards that saw The Sting win Best Picture. So did the two of us agree with any of the actual wins that year, which included Jack Lemmon, Glenda Jackson, and Tatum O'Neal? Well, you're just going to have to tune into that episode and find out for yourself. That's going to wrap it up for my November watches. Hope you had a little bit of fun listening to this, and be on the lookout for more of this series on the first of each new month. I'm Andrew. Can't wait to see you next time.